Hi guys, I keep asking this question and I've yet to hear a proper response. Why do the Conservatives keep talking about immigration? Do they honestly believe that people who voted for the Labour Party in 2024 will switch to the Conservatives because they have a plan on immigration? Do they honestly believe they can stop the flow of MPs, ex-MPs and of course voters going to reform? Because every time they talk about immigration, they're helping one person, and that's Nigel Farage. So Chris Philp was asked about immigration when he was on GB News, and it was a bit of a car crash. Have a listen.
Why did your government between 2020 and 2024 let in 1 million Indians to Britain?
Well, you would have to ask the ministers who took those decisions.
No, we know the answer, Chris. The answer is Brexit. Now, Chris Philp, as far as I remember, I could be wrong here, but as far as I remember, he was a Remainer. Of course, he had to jump on board the Brexit bandwagon like everyone else in order to save his career. But he knows the answer. It's Brexit. Because immigration from the EU declined, dropped off dramatically as a result of Brexit. It was replaced by immigration outside the EU. But Chris can't say that because Brexit is fundamental. It's a cornerstone of the Conservative Party now. You're not allowed to criticise Brexit.
The numbers that in total were far too high, in my view. I've explained why already. Social cohesion, mass low-skilled migration doesn't actually add to the economy. I should say that limited amounts of high-skill migration does add to the economy. So
Okay, but when they talk about low-skilled migration, they're talking about people working in care homes, staff in hospitals, not doctors, nurses, specialists. We're talking about people at the lower end of the economic scale. They're talking about people working in restaurants. These are the people who are the backbone of the economy. You know, you can't have a functioning hospital if somebody isn't cleaning it. You can't have a care home without the staff. So while the Conservatives would say, well, we don't want low-skilled, so-called low-skilled immigration, we just want high-skilled immigration. Yes, but you need people at the lower end of the economic scale to keep the system going.
People want to come here and work in IT, financial services, scientific research, those kind of like highly paid, high value adding professions, like limited numbers of people in those areas. I think that is a good thing, but mass low skilled migration, which I'm afraid is what we've seen, just cannot happen again.
You say I should ask the ministers. I mean, you were a minister in the Home Office in Boris Johnson's government, working under Priti Patel, focusing on illegal migration. I know that wasn't legal, but you were part of that government. You were part of various Conservative governments in that period, in which 1 million Indians were allowed into Britain against your manifesto pledge.
Yeah, so I was not responsible for legal migration.
It's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault. Whose fault is it? I don't know. I better not say because I don't want to throw a friend under a bus. What the Conservatives are trying to do here is they're trying to say, look, we support the idea of legal migration in a limited and specific way, and we're against illegal immigration. But they won't define what illegal immigration is unless they'll say it's asylum seekers. But asylum seekers are not in the country illegally if they are making a claim. The only people we could loosely define as illegal migrants are people who have overstayed their visa. But generally, if you have overstayed your visa, you will be deported. Because if you're coming from a country that was granted a visa, it's easier to deport people back there. It's difficult to deport people to places like Afghanistan because they obviously didn't come with a visa and they didn't come via a safe route because those have been closed off.
Migration, as you say, and I didn't get cited on any of those papers. When anyone did ask my opinion, I said I thought migration should come down. And I remember when I was in the...
Why? We keep hearing this. Immigration needs to come down. There's a shortage of workers in the NHS. There's a shortage of workers in the care sector. There's a shortage of... And I mentioned it in a video recently, there's a 50,000 worker shortage in the construction sector. Now, the Conservatives keep saying, you need to build more houses. They say, well, you need to build more houses. Okay, build houses with whom? With what workers? Because until we have advanced technology, we still have to build houses with people. And if you want to build houses, then you need people. And if you can't find them in the local area, then you have to go further afield. So you have to encourage people to come, not discourage them from coming, especially as there's a shortage.
The Treasury briefly, and the then Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, wanted to reduce migration. Traditionally, the Treasury has been resistant to that, but I said to her, look, if you want to put through measures to reduce migration, you're not going to have any objections at all from me. One of the problems is that the sort of economic orthodoxy in the UK, by which I partly mean the Treasury, but also just the sort of wider group of economic forecasters, had this dogma that net migration was like good for the economy. Now,
it's not a dogma, it's the reality. If you want a growing economy, you need workers. Once again, until we have AI or automation to replace workers, you still need people to do jobs. And if you don't have the people, then businesses cannot expand. And we don't even have to look at the NHS or the care sector. We can look at private businesses, small businesses that want to expand. If they can't find the workers, they don't expand. This does not help the economy. This is why, in part, why the economy is doing so badly. You see a bit of growth and then you see a dip, then a little bit more growth and then a dip. This is not a strong growing economy. You need workers. Once again, until the robots arrive.
Now, it turns out that is not true. Certain specific types of migration, like high-skilled people, like I say, working in finance, scientific research, artificial intelligence, that's fine. That is good for the economy. But mass low-skilled migration actually isn't, because workforce participation is actually very low among some of these nationalities, and people work.
What are you talking about? When it came to difference. So what the Conservatives decided to do was, we're going to make it more difficult for people to come in with their families. So people used to be able to come with their families, but people came with their families because of Brexit. When workers were coming from the EU, they would come over, they would stay for a few months, and then they would go back to their home country. There would be no incentive for them to bring their families with them, because they could jump on a 2-hour flight and be back in wherever. That changed because of Brexit. People were much further away, and they're doing much lower wage jobs, so they want to bring their families with them in order to stay close to them, to have, to, in some cases, to provide support for elderly parents or to look after children. Parents are brought over to look after the children, or families want to stay together. The situation is completely different to when the UK was a member of the European Union. And either the Brexiteers didn't understand this, or people like Chris Philp did understand it, but have now decided to forget about that reality.
Working on lower wages, like, for example, £20,000 a year, and people were allowed in to work on those wages, actually take more in public services or consume more in public services than they pay in tax.
No, there's no evidence to back up that claim. Generally, the people who are coming in are younger people. They are less of a burden. I don't like to use that term, but this is a term that's often used, burden on the state, because they are generally healthier. They're not requiring so much support from the NHS, and in many cases they can't get benefits because they don't meet the criteria. So by definition, they're not a heavier burden on the state.
So this idea that's been prevalent for the last 10, 20 years, that any net migration is good for the economy, turns out it's completely untrue.
So how are you going to grow the economy? What is the Conservatives' response to growing the economy? Well, we'll just cut taxes. Okay, that's the way to grow the economy. Cut taxes. And we saw with Liz Truss how that worked out as well. Unfunded tax cuts. It's going to make life much more difficult for ordinary people. But the Conservatives don't care about ordinary people. It's about, once again, the multimillionaires and billionaires. We'll cut taxes for them. They'll be happy. They'll continue to donate to our party. The Conservatives used to rely on a very small group of... they used to rely on a large group of donors. Now they rely on a very small group of donors. And that small group of donors are the richest people, who want, of course, tax cuts because they benefit from that at the expense of everyone else, including public services. These people should be nowhere near the levers of power again. And fortunately, in the case of the Conservatives, they will probably be nowhere near the levers of power anytime soon. But on the other side of that, of course, Reform UK are rising. Conservatives are going there, abandoning their party to join Reform because they see it as the wave of the future. They see it as a future government. And what's happening is the trash of the Conservative Party, the people who are rejected at the ballot box, many of them are the first to go. And we'll probably see more of that. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.